Hi and welcome to Lesson 8. As we begin this lesson, I'm going to have a look at our end product. I'm going to open Lesson 8 end and we're going to preview it. I'd like to draw your attention to two things in here as we work through this. This lesson is going to be about creating rollovers, and rollovers basically mean that something on your page changes when you interact with them, especially with the mouse. So if we have a look at the About Us button and the academics on the right here, as I mouse over them, they change appearance. And the same with the objects down the side here. And notice if we click Events up on the side here, the actual events stays on the page and it rolls in information, but it still stays on the layout page. And those are called remote rollovers. I'm going to close this file now and we'll go to Lesson Start, and we'll be looking at page 278. Step 1 is on page 279. One of the instructions at the beginning of this lesson is to try to make sure that the page and the inspector palette and the toolbars are all sort of visible in the same area, because we're going to be working with the combination here. Step 1, we want our basic objects to be visible. Step 2, standard editing tool. Click inside this area here. Step 3, hold down the control key, click and hold the table object, and we want 1 row 2 columns, and I'll put it in at the cursor. This table is located here because the alignment in this table is set to be right. We want to put an image into the first cell. Step 5. Step 6 talks about arranging things. Step 7, there's an images folder. In step 8, the image object I added is sitting here. My inspector, fetch URL, select About Us GIF, and it dropped it in there. There's a bit of discussion on page 280 into page 281. Creating self-rollovers. Self-rollovers are the most common rollovers. The action of the mouse's trigger. Basically that means when a user either mouses over an area or actually clicks something, that's a trigger. The trigger causes a change between two files or more, depending on what's set up. So a rollover requires at least 2 image files, one to display on the page before the action is triggered, and the other one to display when the user interacts either by clicking or mousing over. Page 281, Step 1. If not currently selected, click on the About Us graphic. Window, Rollovers. Just to recap really quickly again what I said before, we have a couple of states. The normal one is going to be what the image looks like when it's just sitting on the page. The over is what it looks like when the mouse travels over the image, and the down is what happens when the user actually clicks on the image and clicks mouse button down on the image. Notice normal is defined, over and down are not. Step 3 says to click on the over state. On the bottom of this, there's Create New Rollover Image button, or Create New Rollover Image. We'll click that, and we'll drag the Fetch URL to the About Us area here. It would have been helpful if I would have had the Images folder open before I started to try and find things over in the Site folder. So there's the over, and there's the down. And that should cover us for steps 5, 6. So we can click preview. Step 7, over, and clicking down. Go back to layout. As with many programs, there are quicker ways of doing things in Go Live. It would take a lot of time and trouble to make 3 links for every single button on your page. Page 283 talks about detecting rollover images as an automatic function. There are a couple of requirements that you need to think about before you actually embark on using this. Number 1, your images need to be the same size. And number 2, they need to be named in a certain fashion. So, if you took a look on page 282, you would notice in the step 5, there's an About Us rollover GIF, there's an About Us rollover _down, and there's About Us GIF. So whoever set up these buttons, and further down if you look, you see navbar, academics down, academics over, academics GIF. And those are named in such a way that Go Live will automatically detect those as being rollovers for a particular button. That's something that you should keep in mind then if you hope to make rollovers for your own personal site or for your group site. Step 1 says to go to Edit, Preferences, under Images, there's a rollover. Make sure Automatically Detect and Automatically Open are both checked off, and go OK. That was step 2. Step 3, click and drag an image into the right hand side of our page. See if I can resize it a bit here. So there's our About button, and I'll put an image in the cell beside it. In the source on the inspector, I'm going to drag the fetch URL to the academics GIF. And notice in the rollover, it automatically updated my over and down buttons. And if you wish, you can click preview and have a look and see what's going on. I'm going to save. Adding a link to a rollover on page 284 talks about how to actually set up a button as a button. There's no point having a rollover button just for looks. It should actually do something when you use it. This section also talks about supplying alternate text so that users who are using a screen reader or other assistive technologies can access your website. We're going to select the About Us image. There's an alternate text field in the inspector under Basic. We'll click in there and we'll enter About Us. We'll go to the Link tab. I'm going to close my Images area, go to my Pages area, go back to my About, fetch URL, and we'll go to About Us. And we'll save. Understand you could do the same thing for your academics. Happened we to have a page for that. For our purposes, we'll consider lesson 8 to be complete, but feel free to continue to work through it if you wish.